Hey and welcome back. We're continuing our mini series on turning a customer conceptual idea into full-blown plans that we can use in our workshop. Today we're taking that conceptual diagram we did last time and turning that into a detailed diagram. That sounds good? Stick around. Hey, so welcome to the Woodgrafter. My name's Andy Guile and our mission here is to inspire, educate and support you in your journey to becoming a better woodworker. We do that through a whole series of videos, project videos, taking you step by step through producing something. We also look at tools, techniques, tips, reviews, setups, and every now and then mini-series, just like this one, that takes a specialist area of interest and explores it in detail. So if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing now. Give me a thumbs up. With that said, let's get started. In this series, we've been looking at how I turn a customer idea, the initial customer consultation, into plans that we can actually go ahead and produce in the workshop. In the first episode, we looked at the customer and we started to understand the customer's needs. What do they want to produce? How is it going to fit into their furniture, their design inspirations? And we came up with some loose ideas. In the second video, we turned those ideas into a concept diagram that we could share with the customer and finalize the overall details of the project. In this episode, we're going to turn that conceptual diagram into a detailed diagram that's the basis of the plans and the costings we provide to the customer. Let's get over to the computer and have a look. In the last video, you remember we created the conceptual drawing. We had a view of the table, we had some overall sizes for the table, and then we had the diagram that puts into context of where it's going to. Remember, sitting on a rug in between two armchairs. Today we're going to take these sizes and we're going to use those to create the more detailed view that will actually create the plan. If you have been paying attention, you notice our size is reduced again to 1240. After conversations with the customer, they actually like the idea of this sitting in the inner square of the rug. If you remember, we did extend it a little bit. Now, the customer felt that was becoming a bit overpowering and they reverted back to this slightly shorter table because they don't want to overpower in the room. Now, these diagrams aren't wasted. What I do is I save these down as 2D images, simply going to File, Export 2D Graphics, and then I can save them down. And then you'll see those reappearing in the plans that we create. So you can see that's a situational diagram. You can see we've then got the table, and then we get down to a bit more details of the dimensions. So I'll be using the dimensions on here to create the detailed plan. Now you'll notice I'm not building on the conceptual diagram here, I'm creating a whole new plan. What I find is, because there's going to be a lot more detail in this one, and I'm also going to show the laminated legs and the laminated tabletop, it's just easier not getting confused with the layers. So a new diagram is what I tend to use. As always, I'm going to come in, start off with a new layer, and I'm just going to call this one called Foundation. And I start off by drawing the overall size of the table. And we know it's 1240 by 700. 1240 by 700. Now that just gives me the floor plan that we're going to work inside. I'll just make that a group. Next thing is I want to work on the legs, so I create a new layer and we call that layer legs, and we make sure we select that. Want to allow for the table overhang that was 25 millimeters all the way round, and now I can come in and put the legs in. Now the overall legs were 80 by 80, but we're going to laminate these using 4 pieces. So these are actually going to be 40 by 40, and we know that the overall height of this is going to be 700 minus 30, which was 670. I can now double click on this one and make this a component. Leg sub 1. Now I use a plugin called Cut List Bridge, and Cut List Bridge allows me to specify some information about this leg that we've just built, and that's shown here on the extended entity info. The reason I'm using Cut List Bridge here as a plugin is because I then use Cut List Pro further down the line to give me my parts list, to allow me to do my costings, my cut list, my layout list, and so on and so forth. So the information I add in extended entity info is used by that program.
So I can come along and say this is a sub-assembly, and it's a sub-assembly of a leg. I don't want to put any tag information, no notes. I can specify the material type. It's dimensioned lumber and it's American oak. Because it's not really dimensioned lumber, I'm actually using rough cut lumber. I just allow a bit of thickness adjustment of 2 millimeters all the way round on that cut. And that just means it's going to put some additional meat around this, which allows me to take this from rough cut stock. I'm now going to copy this, and then we're going to copy this again. So we're going to copy this one and this one. I'm now going to make the second lamination. Now the reason I made a new component called leg sub 2 rather than just copying this one is to do with the way that components work. If you make a copy of a component, whatever you do to one component, you do to everything. So for example, if I were to make this leg sub shorter, you can see that affects all of those. Now at some point we may want to put some mortises inside here, so we wouldn't want those mortises to appear in all these components, and that's why I make it unique. Next thing I want to do is start to think about these drawer units. Now if you remember, we were going to go for a flat run of drawers. Now talking to the customer, we're going to drop a couple of handles on these drawers, so therefore I want to set these back a little bit, so we're going to have a shadow line of 2 millimeters as well on the drawers. Initially we're going to do flush drawers and they're going to be pushed to open. So this is a slight change to the design in conversations with the customer. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this layer stretchers. Now what I want to do, I want to put a stretcher across the top of here on this front leg from this point to this point across here, and that's to give me some strength, and there'll be one at the top and one at the bottom, and the edge grain on that will be seen from the front, so our drawers will sit between those two frames. So I'm going to put this in place, and we'll make it initially 18 millimeters thick by 14 millimeters wide. We'll take that to the end there, and we're going to make this a component, and we're going to call it stretcher, and we'll give it some variables. So it's part of the stretcher subassembly. The material type is going to be oak, and we'll give it a bit of fat to allow us to mill it down. Now I want to come in with a shadow line, so I'm just going to take a shadow line now and just push that in by 2 millimeters, and that's just giving that shadow line that you can see that will offset that shadow line here at the side, which is looking good. Now I want a second one of these, and we're going to move this one down 150 millimeters. So I'll just drop a guideline in to help me, and we can now simply clone this, drag it to the front edge there onto the line, and now our drawer will sit inside here and it'll be framed nicely by that material. Now if I was to build this in this way, this is going to be an incredibly weak coffee table. So I want to start to put some strengtheners across the middle here. I want to build the internal carcass. So we'll create another layer called internal carcass. Now the internal material is not going to be seen, so to keep the cost down and the weight down a little bit, I'm going to make this out of tulip wood, a popular wood. So we'll come down and we'll just make an internal thing that will be 18 millimeters by 150, and we'll just drag this across to there, and I'm just going to shrink this down by 50 on the top and by 50 on the bottom, and that's just centered that piece in the middle there. And all that's going to do is to strengthen this inside joint on these legs. And I want to put some cross braces in this. So again, we will make this 18 millimeters thick by 50, and we'll just get the size of this. Okay, now I don't actually want this piece here. I want one here and one here, and the easiest way to get the spacings is to clone it as you would normally, take it to its end position and press divide by 4, and you can see that's put in place 1, 2, 3, 4 equally spaced out. So now I can come along and delete the ones I don't want, which is that one, and that one, and that's put those in the right position for me. Now we're still sticking with the 4 drawer design, 2 on either side, so I now want to put a cross piece in the middle here. Now this is going to be quite a complicated shape, so we'll make a new layer and we'll call it the internal divider. Now the way that I think about my layers, these are the sub-steps. So I want each layer to have a piece on it that we build, and that will be a step on the overall project. Now it's quite a complicated shape, the internal divider, so we'll do a dedicated step for that. So we'll first of all come in and we'll make a dividing piece. We'll make that 114 by 40, and we'll pull that out to be 18 millimeters for now. And we'll make this a component that we'll call internal divider. I can clone this one, but this time I'm going to divide it by 2, and that's put it directly in the center point there for me. I'm going to move this one back by 2 millimeters to allow for that shadow line. I'm going to make this middle one unique, so I make it unique. Now I need to give it a name because it's just called up here internal divider #1. So I'm just going to call that internal divider center. And you can see it's retained the information, so it's still part of the internal divider, it's still made of oak, and it's still 2 millimeter for slack. But because I've now made it unique, I can come along and I can stretch this one all the way across, like so. Now I'm going to just do a little bit more work on this. I'm going to draw a line on that end, and I'm going to draw a line on this end, which means I can now raise that top up by 18 millimeters and repeat that underneath. So I've now got quite a strong frame in the center there for the internal divider. If I just hide the stretchers, you can see the shape that we're going for on that middle piece of material. Okay, next step, I want to put the drawers in. First thing I notice, I've nowhere for the drawer runner to sit on this side. So we're just going to create a new layer, and we'll call this layer drawers. And selecting the layer. Actually no, I'll put the drawer runner on the internal carcass, I think. So we'll just use the same trick as we've used before. We'll just make an overly large component that's going to be 150 by 40. We'll drag it out to 18 millimeters. Then we can reduce the top by 50, reduce the bottom by 50, and that's centered that into the middle, and now we can drag it across. Okay, now select the drawer layer, and I want to just work out the size of the drawer front, so I'll just come in and put that there like so. Now there's going to be, whoops-a-daisy, there's going to be blind dovetails on this drawer, so we're going to make the front of this 20 millimeters thick. And I want to work out how long I want this, so it's going to end up somewhere in the middle of this. That's 570 wide, so we made it 285, so I'll make it 280 long from that piece, and then we'll just check from the other side to make sure that looks sensible. Yeah, so the back of the drawers won't catch each other. So I just want to transfer this line down the material, so it's going to be there, and then I can turn that line off. Now we should be able to, on that line, just bring that across. Side of the drawers are going to be 15 millimeters thick. I can raise that up to there, and drop that down to there, and that's now the size of my drawers. So once I've got that worked out, I can hide everything apart from the drawers. So we'll get rid of the end panels, internal carcasses, the legs and the stretchers. And now you can see I'm just working purely on the drawers. So I'm going to come in and we will make this a component, and we'll call this drawer side. I'm just going to hide this for 1 second. And now I can just lengthen this by 15 millimeters. And now I can unhide the front, and you can start to see how that's going to look in terms of the dovetail setup. So now I'm going to drop the dovetails on the drawer. I use an extension from Woodworks. It's a great extension. It can do dovetails, mortise and tenons, make boards for you, put holes in things. So it's quite a good plug-in to have. Looking at the preferences, I can talk about the number of dovetails. I think we'll have 5 dovetails on this. Angle 1 in 7 is good enough for oak. Pin width 6mm, end pins about 5mm. We'll take it from the base, and the thickness of the stock is 15mm. So with the preferences set, I can come into here, click dovetails from the baseline to the end, spin round, repeat the activity from the end, and then same on this side, and then we can come around to the front, and we can do the front dovetails. Not going all the way because they are blind dovetails. Okay, there you go, a dovetail drawer done. Looking quite good. Now I want to drop the base in the drawer, so we'll just take some measurements. I want the internal groove to run into this dovetail, so we were to look at somewhere about 9mm, say. We'll come up by 9mm. And then we'll come up by 19mm, and that gives me a 10mm hole. I don't want to come all the way through at the back here, so we're going to make a 5mm insert. This is 15mm, so we'll come in 10mm. And now we can put in that groove, and we can inset it by 5mm. And there you go, that's our groove done. So all we need to do now is to put the base in. Get rid of those guides. Oops. Hide these for the moment. Look on the overall size of this thing. Now we don't need to do 5mm longer than that. That gives them the overall width of it. We'll make this a component. We'll call it drawer base. Hide everything, and we've now made a drawer with the top, bottom nicely dovetailed. So the final thing is the top. Now we know that the top was 700, so we're going to model, I think, 10 laminations at 70 each. So let's get the position of the first lamination. So let's create a new layer, and we'll call this layer top, and we'll turn that layer on, and we'll just come down here, 1240 by 70, and we know the top is going to be 30mm thick. And we'll make this a component. And now we can lift this up by 470. Now for some random reason I've made our legs too long. Can't remember why I did that. Probably concentrating too much. 670, so they're 200 millimeters too long. So we'll change that now then. And we'll make you 200 shorter. And select everything, and we want to move it down by 200. So now it's simply a matter of duplicating the top. And there you go. Our table is now completely modelled with enough detail to create the plans. And we'll look at creating those plans on the next video.
So there we go. We've now got a detailed diagram, and that detailed diagram is the foundation of all the plans and costings and materials that we need to build this project. Look at that in the next video.